Hi, I'm Michael Thompson, and welcome to another week of the Heart of a Warrior expedition on Where It Hurts. So important to understand and identify the places in us that are hurting so that we then can bring them to Jesus for healing. The mission of the kingdom of darkness is to wound us and pull us away from God. The mission of the kingdom of Christ is to heal us and bring us closer to God. So all of us have been wounded. And those are the very things that we have to research our story, see what happened, and bring those moments to Jesus. Join us in this session as we explore the larger story and your role and your part in it. Where it hurts, what's in the way of you stepping into the man that you're becoming. So if being loved is where to start, and that's the very thing that most of us have experienced a large deficit. Is there ever a time that maybe in your story, maybe when you were a boy, that you were loved, you felt loved, you had this? Now maybe later the chapters come when it gets taken out or pulled away, but was there ever a time you felt beloved, the belovedness, the being loved?
Yeah, you probably remember my story that the very first memory I have of any kind of interaction with my father is at, 4 or 5 years old. We're living in an apartment outside of Philadelphia, and apparently I was afraid of the lightning and the thunder and the rain. And so my dad came home from work early and there was a thunderstorm, and he put his raincoat on and put a raincoat around me and held me in his arms, and we went outside and stood in the backyard of this apartment building, and just the rain and the lightning and thunder all around us, and he just held me, and it's the strongest memory I have of my dad. And as you know the rest of my story, it's the only memory, or the only tender memory I have. But it was such an important, it was almost like it was too good to be true because it happened so rarely after that. But it was such a beautiful memory.
Look at the ingredients of that. Just kind of, you're with your dad. Mm-hmm. Here's this big figure. He's got you close.
Yeah.
There's scary stuff going on. And what?
You're safe.
You're safe. Yeah. That is so key for the beloved son. Mm-hmm. To be loved, it settles things. It makes, you're protected and you're provided for. You're protected and you're provided for. Those are big qualities. That a beloved son knows that his father is going to do that.
My folks got divorced when I was really young, and divorce is such a hard thing for so many men, but I really lucked out. I got a double portion out of the deal. I got a stepfather who loved me and a father who stayed engaged in my life. And, two things that each of these men said as I was growing up. I remember my father said, "You're so much smarter than I ever was." And just that encouragement. Wow, my dad thinks that I am smart.
How old were you? How old were you when that went down?
It started probably when I was 8 and went into high school. And just the confidence that gave me about what I was doing, that my dad thought I would be able to accomplish so much because I was smarter than him. Of course, he's my dad. I look up to him.
Right.
And then my stepfather was a mighty man and a great hunter. And I remember when I killed my first deer with him and how proud he was for me. It was just such a special time. I did something great in his eyes.
Yeah. Those are good stories. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, I was very fortunate to have a dad that didn't mind saying, "I love you, I'm proud of you," and we had so many shared experiences, mainly around baseball. We were on the baseball field all the time. Mm-hmm. And his reaction, now as I've coached my own sons, and I can watch so many young men looking for the reaction of their dad when they do something good or if they do something bad. His steadiness in not reacting if I did something poorly on the field was comforting. It was that, it's okay. There's so much more than your performance on the field. So that was helpful. But he was pretty affectionate too. I remember he was a big, 6'4", 250, just a big bear of a man, and just his hugs. You're talking about that kind of wrapped around you. It just felt good. And I know there's a lot of men out there that did not get that experience. And so what they hoped for with love and affection was abuse. And so many horrific things that shape their view of God, but for me, in a wrong way. For me, it's easy to settle into God seeing me as a beloved son because I saw my father seeing me that way.
Yeah.
And that was such a huge, huge blessing to be able to have that.
It sure is.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of men who have suffered, you know, at that early stage. And then there's others who maybe that went okay. You know, there were moments where our fathers were bestowing a message to us. But I don't know any man that didn't come to a crossroads when, I don't know when it started. I can't even remember when it started. But I remember developing this, I want to make my dad proud. And so I would strive. You know, I knew when he was in the stands, and he was in the stands a lot. And he wasn't trying to create pressure, but somewhere along the lines, I picked up this idea that if I hit it, if I make the shot, if I carve it, if I draw it, you know, that there is this reward of validation. I had no concept that he loved me just because I was his. That didn't come till later. One of the stories I can think of about being loved, and it came later in my 30s, but it was a story that happened when I was 13. We had moved from one state to another, so all the infrastructure, right, of Little League and all the sports teams, and we were kind of a sports family. My dad coached teams and stuff, so we moved, and we're kind of out of our element. And I remember trying out in this new city for baseball. And there was about 40 kids. I mean, I didn't know how they were doing it. But the next thing I know is my dad and another dad are coaching a team, and I'm on that team. Well, it wasn't till 20-some years later that I found out, you know what my dad did? He found out all these boys that got cut. And he called the league commissioner and said, I want to form a team, and I want those boys. I was beloved. You know, he was protecting me from the hurt of that and providing for me another place to play, right? And the scriptures tell us that if we need this, if this is settling to our heart, well, what about Jesus? Where do we find this to happen in his life and in his story? Any validating moments in the Gospels? Right? The baptism?
Right. Yeah, right before he goes in the wilderness, before the battle. He had to be told.
Isn't the timing interesting of that, the sequence of that? Mm-hmm. Before he goes into a test, into a trial, into that, he's...
And like you say, Michael, it's about our belovedness, and that's what the wilderness was about. Yeah. Are you testing that belovedness? And God had to settle it before the battle. You are my beloved son, and I am pleased in you.
I mean, something's very special about that. Mm-hmm. If Jesus had that moment, and he is this image that we bear and the image that God is restoring, then we may need a few of those.
Sure.
Validating, ceremonial, significant moments. You know, Luke chapter 3, baptism, and God announces, the Father breaks in, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. It's just
in Matthew 2 where he says, this is my son, listen to him.
Yeah.
So there's the
transfiguration.
The baptism and the transfiguration, Those are validating. So is there, as we are beloved sons and becoming beloved sons, this whole idea of belovedness, has there been a story, an illustration, a part of this in your journey in the last few years where God's stepped in to father you, to show you who you are?
You know, Michael, you share a really great story in this chapter about when your dad would come home from work and you guys would be hiding, and he'd walk through the door and it'd be surprise, pandemonium. And I realized that God is fathering me as I father my children. And so that's my everyday. The best part of my day is I walk through the door and my little kids just go crazy. There's fireworks, Daddy. Yeah. And that just melts my heart. But as I get to squeeze them and love them and smile and encourage, I realize not only am I doing that for them, but as I do that, God is right there fathering
You told me
me.
a story about God showing, I mean, really showing you, Blake, this is how you love Miles.
Yeah, it was shortly after Miles was born. I remember we were encouraged to take some questions of the Lord. God, how do you see me? And God said, you know how you hold your son? And, you know, my firstborn, that's my prize. That's my boy, and I hold him tight. And he said that, you're beginning to see how I love you.
That's a good moment.
And that's one of the most profound lessons that we can learn as we become fathers. And those of us who are blessed to have that experience, you see things so much more clearly as to how God can love us unconditionally, how he does love us unconditionally, and how we can rest in that, and how we try to reassure our kids with that same message that no matter what, I'm going to love you. But I think for me, it's just time after time, God's showing that he cares about the details of our lives. Just the little moments of joy that sometimes the enemy tries to steal because of our busyness, whether it's a walk on the beach or sitting in a deer stand, just enjoying those moments with God that he gives us as a gift. And I think, so it's not necessarily one moment, it's many.
Yeah.
It's many moments of God showing me that, hey, I love you. And these things are settled. And there's almost this mental transition of the passage where it talks about God being Abba, Father. So we see God as the Holy Father, but when we can, at a head and heart level, see him as Dad, as that is translated, I think that's a big step.
Yeah.
And seeing him as
settling
this
the heart.
caring dad that is there, is present, is engaged, is involved, is caring, is loving. We long for that. And when we see it through circumstances of life, it's profound.
And let me encourage those guys that aren't dads or that maybe missed their kids growing up, like I did. You know, I didn't surrender my life to Christ till my kids were grown and gone. But then I had the joy or the experience of grandchildren. And because I was more oriented at that time, more present, more engaged, God just showed me he said, you know, do you see how when you get down on your knees and they run to you, what that does to your heart? And when they say, Papa, Papa, push me higher in the swings, what that does to your heart.
Yeah.
And even, you know, if you never have the grandfathering experience, there's men in my life that support and encourage me, and God would say, do you see how much he loves you? He'd do anything for you.
Yeah.
And so there are other ways, too, to experience it through grandfathering, other friends, wives.
Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between a busy life and a full life. What's the kind of life we were promised?
Abundant.
A full and abundant life. And the difference is a busy life is a life that revolves around you, but a full and a busy life is a life that revolves around others. And the distance between here and here is the journey that a man's going to have to take to settle matters of his heart so that he doesn't have to take his primary questions. Do you see me? Do you love what you see? Am I valuable? Am I worth significant to others? But rather to the one who made you. And there's that moment then between father and son. I love you. I'm with you. I'm for you. The promises of God begin to really overshadow the warnings of God. Don't go other places. Don't go other ways. Here's where life is. Be the beloved. I want you. I see you. And that's what if we could experience that?
Those moments in my life finally got settled along the journey when I took probably the hardest step you'll do on your journey, but the most profound, and that's retracing them and allowing God to go back into those wounding, tough, hard moments of your past that maybe you chose to forget about or refused to talk about. And to go back and allow God to show me these moments. I mean, I can remember like it was yesterday at a conference, and the Lord reminded me of this excruciating, wounding moment in junior high. I can remember standing in the hallway at the lockers and feeling like I wasn't invited to the sleepover I wasn't part of. And the what I heard in my heart, you know, the lie I bought was, they don't care about you, you have nothing to offer, you're not accepted. And I spent the next 20 years of my life trying to prove that I had something to offer that was worth it, until God showed me that that was a lie.
Yeah.
That was I offer out of the glory of myself. I don't have to prove that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Why is it so hard for us to be loved? I mean, there's a lot of Christianity that says it's our job to love. And yet what we're talking about is, no, first things first, being loved, receiving love, letting Him love you. Does that sound selfish to you?
It's hard. For men, it's really hard because loving is hard, but at least in loving, you're kind of controlling when you love, how you love, who you love. But when you just open your arms and receive, say, love me, I mean, that's vulnerable. It's hard.
And trusting and faith. Yes.
No,
you
tough.
said it. You said it.
But we're stuck. We're stuck in the old man. Yeah. We're stuck in this old identity. And as long as we're still there, we're not going to be worthy of love in our own eyes. So that impedes the ability to receive it from not only God, but from anybody else.
This is where we start. This is where it has to begin, in being loved, being the beloved, settling the questions, the effort and striving and energy that we've all expended at trying to arrange for life for ourselves, and just say, I don't want to do it this way anymore. This isn't working. It hasn't worked. Even on its best days, it was there, a taste and gone. But what if it was full, and what if it was constant? What if it was available all the time? That's what we're talking about being loved, being the beloved son. That's where this starts, and that's where we got to go.
I know for me, as it is part of the journey, deeper intimacy with God has involved inviting Jesus to step into those broken places, whether it's lies that I've believed, that He's exposed and I've asked Him to step in and heal, or just the wounds of my own heart where I need His touch. I need that peace that transcends all understanding. Whether it's becoming anxious about things, whatever the area is, when I ask Jesus to step in and touch those broken places, that verse where He says, I've come to heal the brokenhearted and set the captives free, that verse comes alive. And it deepens that journey, and it's the expression of the immeasurably more that I think all of us are after.
You know, Michael, I want to read a passage that you have in this chapter, and you quoted out of the Message version, and it's Ephesians 5, verses 1 and 2. Watch what God does, and then do it, like beloved children who learn proper behavior from their parents. Mostly what God does is love you. Keep company with Him and learn a life of love. Observe how Christ loved us. His love was not cautious, but extravagant. He didn't love in order to get something from us, but to give everything of Himself to us. Love like that.
Wow. That's so good. I mean, just to receive His love, to be loved by God, it implies that that's going to take care of a lot of problems, that's going to settle, some issues. So I know in my journey, I have got these broken places. I have taken on these wounds. The enemy has assaulted, it's built up this false self that I contend with. And then we live in this fallenness with a lot of other needy people. So that's why the old system was doomed to not work. And so to be rescued from that and then to be treated, this is not something that is just fixed or you memorize a new way or a different system. You trade in one system for another. No, this is something much more personal, and you use I love the word intimate, that there are some broken, wounded places in me that God wants to treat, that God wants to heal. When a man goes to God for healing, he is thrust into a beloved son journey that in some time, over some time, that's the very journey, that's the very training that he'll need to then partner with God in this glorious rescue of the hearts of others who are still in the POW camps, who are still in the fallenness, who are still in the predominantly false self way, not living the way that we've been invited and afforded a way to live. So healing is where we've got to go next. I want to invite you to explore with your friends your story and those wounded moments that happen to all of us, and bring those moments to Jesus for healing. Remember, he became like us so that we could become like him.